tell you, Skids, something ain't right. I got nightmares. There's voices. It's just getting worse. There are things in this world that no man should see.
Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper, Vase Odin, and today we will be discussing Skids O'toole, the ex-con. Skids O'toole is a street-smart individual born in Bedford, Massachusetts in 1890. He's a good-hearted person who acquainted himself with some questionable people. It's not clear when he began his life of crime, but it is clear that he was caught eventually and put into prison for a bank robbery. The 37-year-old had been in the process of a crime spree that involved muggings, burglary, and bank robbery. Skids always considered himself lucky, but his luck ran out and he was finally caught. In the slammer, Skids made quick friends with a psychopathic murderer named Brad Hollins, a skinny guy whose strange stories creeped Skids out. But hearing Brad's stories kept Skids sane during his tenure at the prison. His first 2 years were easier since his mother was still alive and he could call and speak with her. But she passed away while he was in prison, which made things harder, not just because she was the only person on the outside who he still kept contact with, but also because she was the reason he was there to begin with. The hospital bills were piling up, and Skids just couldn't keep up anymore. His crime spree was the result of desperation, but the cops didn't care. Brad's stories got more intense over time. He spoke of old ones and the dreamlands. One day, Skids woke up to sounds of chanting. Brad was speaking in strange tongues, and the walls were filled with strange symbols and writing. Skids didn't have time to ask what was going on when Brad spontaneously burst into flames, turning to a burnt husk in seconds. The cops tried to blame Skids, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Skids eventually went on parole and decided to move to Arkham, a city that Brad had mentioned on several occasions when telling his stories. There, Skids might find answers to the many questions he had about the bizarre events he experienced while in prison. In Arkham, Skids lived the life of a scoundrel, going to speakeasies, gambling, and blackjack being one of his main sources of income, and acquainting himself with the sleazy members of the criminal community. He was picked up by the cops who were investigating a bank robbery. During the interrogation, it was revealed that a family heirloom from Innsmouth was part of the stolen goods. The decorations on the necklace were identical to some of the things that Skids' former cellmate drew upon the wall before his mysterious death. This sent chills down Skids' spine. He immediately agreed to work with the cops and help them find out who hit up the bank and why, and what all the mysterious happenings had to do with him. In Arkham Horror the card game, Skids O'Toole is a rogue with some unique abilities that represent his general good luck and opportunistic tendencies. His stat line is Willpower 2, a 3 in both intellect and combat, and a 4 in stealth, or agility as some call it. I really don't know what it's called. He has an 8 in health and a 6 in sanity. His special ability reads, spend 2 resources on your turn, gain an extra action this turn, and there's a limit of once per turn. His Elder Sign ability is a +2, and you gain 2 resources. His special ability is amazingly good, while his Elder Sign ability is pretty average. It's not the best, but also not the worst, by far, and it does synergize pretty well with his special ability. Having an extra turn each round for any type of action, in theory, means that you can be a combat or investigating powerhouse, although the investigating part is severely limited by his deck building rules and the current card base. For combat though, he is definitely pretty reliably above average. Between the rogue cards that naturally give Skids an advantage with resource production and action advantage, such as the amazingly good Leo DeLuca, and the Guardian cards that up the damage output, Skids can throw down with the best of them. The only thing keeping him from being top tier in combat is his relatively low combat skill. It's not terrible, but it will take a bit of work to get an acceptable level if you're looking to be the team's primary damage dealer. After using him for a bit, I've come to the conclusion that Skids works best as a boss killer rather than a regular monster slayer. The rogue event cards synergize very well with burst damage when coupled with Guardian skill cards. Guardian cards that boost damage like Vicious Blow and rogue events like Double or Nothing, with Guardian assets like weapons and Beat Cop for boosted combat, are great when you're building Skids, and they provide some massively large single hits. Of all the investigators, I think Skids relies on card combos more than most. If combos are your thing, this is probably your guy. He also has potential for very big plays, but with the risk of the chaos bag, they can lead to very big disappointments as well. I like this because it goes very well with his gambling background. In my opinion, Skid works best when not built as an evading machine, although evades should be a small part of your strategy with him. Having that extra action allows Skids to use his first action to evade an enemy with Retaliate, and then attack freely for burst damage without risk of retaliation attacks. Skids also has access to tons of free damage cards, and in my opinion, he's one of the 3 investigators that can afford to consistently run Dynamite Blast. Now, resource management is extremely important in a Skids deck because being low on them could mean you lose your free action. I think with him you may actually be okay to opt out of Leo DeLuca because of his high cost, and you can opt for other allies that give you free damage like the Beat Cop or the Dogs. One thing I think you definitely have to do in his deck is add cards that grant free resources, because you'll need as much as you can get. We also should address his low willpower. This can be a huge Achilles heel for Skids. Mixed with his low sanity, Skids can succumb to madness very quickly if you're not careful. It's very important to mitigate this as much as possible and prevent mental trauma, because that's just going to make things worse later on. Now, for the real disappointment with Skids is first his signature card. Wow. On the Lamb. Terrible in most ways. The name makes little sense, as nothing I could find implied that Skids is running from anyone, including the law. But I guess it can refer to running from the creatures in play. I don't know, I still don't think the name is that great. Then the card itself is a slightly different version of Dodge. You can use Dodge on elite enemies, and you can use it during the enemy phase, but not this signature card. Although the card does last the entire round and does prevent attacks from all enemies except elites for the entire round. So that's pretty good, but it has to be played on your turn and at the beginning of the turn, which is kind of a bummer. I do have to say that one of the saving graces of this card is the icons you get when you commit the card to a skill test. 2 wild plus an intellect or an agility icon is very good. So overall, this card is just kind of disappointing. I mean, it's not terrible. I said terrible earlier, but you know, it's not super great either compared to other signature cards. In all, I think it's one of the worst signature cards, in my opinion. Now, pair that with his weakness, and you get a very underwhelming package of signature cards. In my opinion, Skids has hands down the most punishing weakness. If you pull this near the end of the scenario, you're pretty much going to get 2 less experience points, which can cripple you for the long run. Unless you have a card that can quickly add a resource to another card, this is going to take a minimum of 3 rounds to get rid of. If your agenda is near the losing point, you're absolutely getting 2 less experience points this game, especially if you're low on resources and are earning less than 2 resources per round. In a campaign like Dunwich, at least the first half of the campaign, where you earn between 3 and 5 experience points per scenario, This can cripple your campaign if you pull it too many times. Overall, I think Skids is a very interesting investigator with a ton of flavor and some very cool deck design possibilities. I honestly had no interest in playing Skids until I made this video, but running him several times for research for the video, I can honestly tell you that he's risen very high on my list of favorites. Skids can be super fun to play, and I highly recommend that everyone try him out. So that does it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it or found it useful. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have some ideas on how to build a Skids deck, please go ahead and leave them in the comment down there. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe. You know the deal. I'm your daddy, Vase Odin. Till next time, I'll be on the lam.